The blood on Fiona Whitmore's hands had been scrubbed away 3 years ago, but the stain on her reputation would never fade, not in a town like Quartzsite, Arizona territory, where whispers carried farther than the wind across the desert floor. She stood at the window of her modest adobe house on the edge of town, watching the morning sun bleed red across the horizon, same as it had on that terrible day in 1878 when her husband Jacob had died screaming her name. The women at the mercantile still clutched their children closer when she passed. The men tipped their hats out of obligation but refused to meet her eyes. Cursed, they called her, the widow who brought death to everything she touched. First her husband, then the crops on their small plot of land had withered despite her efforts. Then old Mrs. Henderson, who had shown her a kindness, had taken a fall down her front steps 2 days later and broken her neck. Fiona had stopped trying to convince them it was all terrible coincidence. At 23 years old, she had learned that some battles could not be won with words or logic or even tears. So she kept to herself, tended her struggling garden in the unforgiving Arizona heat, and tried not to think about the loneliness that ate at her bones more persistently than any curse ever could. She was mixing cornmeal for her breakfast when she heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the nervous whinny of horses, and then a sound that made her blood run cold despite the oppressive heat already building outside. A woman screaming for help. Fiona dropped her wooden spoon and ran to the door, stepping out into the dusty street just in time to see the Henderson boy, Peter, no more than 8 years old, standing frozen in the middle of the road while a wagon pulled by 2 spooked horses barreled toward him. The driver had fallen or jumped off, and the horses were running wild, eyes rolling white with panic. She did not think. She just moved. Her legs carried her into the street, her arms reached for the boy, and she felt the impact as she grabbed him and threw them both sideways. They hit the hard, packed earth together, rolling, and Fiona felt something sharp tear across her shoulder as the wagon wheel caught her. The horses thundered past, close enough that she could smell their sweat and fear. Pain lanced through her body, but she held the boy tight, feeling his small heart hammering against her chest like a trapped bird. For a moment, there was only the 2 of them and the dust settling around them like a shroud. Then hands were pulling them apart, voices were shouting, and Fiona found herself staring up at a circle of faces, some concerned, most wary as if her curse might leap from her skin to theirs. "She saved him," someone said, voice full of wonder and confusion. "Probably her curse what spooked those horses in the first place," another voice muttered. Just loud enough to carry, Fiona closed her eyes against the words and the pain in her shoulder and the tears that wanted to come but she had promised herself years ago would never fall in public again. Strong hands lifted her then, hands that were not tentative or afraid, and when she opened her eyes she found herself looking into a face that took what little breath she had left clean away. The man holding her stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His hair hung past his shoulders, dark as a raven's wing with threads of amber where the light caught it. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of beard, and eyes the color of storm clouds over the mountains. He wore buckskin pants and a worn leather vest over a cotton shirt that strained against the muscles of his arms and chest. Everything about him spoke of strength and wildness, and a life lived far from the constraints of civilized society. "Easy now," he said, and his voice was deep and rough like stones tumbling in a river. "You are bleeding." "I am fine," Fiona said, trying to pull away, but her shoulder screamed in protest and the world tilted sideways. "You are not fine," the mountain man said matter-of-factly. "Where can I take you?" "My house. The one with the blue door just there." She pointed weakly down the street. He carried her as if she weighed nothing at all, walking with a sure stride that parted the gathered crowd like Moses and the Red Sea. Fiona was aware of the stares, the whispers starting up again, fresh fuel for the gossip fires. But the man holding her seemed oblivious to it all, focused entirely on getting her home. He had to duck his head to enter her small house, and he looked around briefly before heading straight for her bed in the corner. He laid her down with surprising gentleness for a man so large and rough-looking. "The cut needs cleaning," he said. "Do you have clean cloth and whiskey?" "In the chest by the window," Fiona managed. "But, sir, you do not have to do this. I can manage on my own." "I am sure you can," he said, already moving to retrieve the supplies. "But today you do not have to." He returned with the cloth and her precious bottle of whiskey, kept for medicinal purposes, and the occasional night when the loneliness grew too heavy to bear. He poured water from her pitcher into her washing basin and began cleaning the wound with hands that were surprisingly skilled and gentle. "You have done this before," she said through gritted teeth as the whiskey touched raw flesh. "A man learns many things living in the mountains. Treating wounds is high on the list of necessary skills." He worked in silence for a moment, his face close to hers as he concentrated on his task. "The name is Owen Xavier. I came down from the Bradshaw Mountains to trade pelts and supplies." "Fiona Whitmore," she said, then added because she had learned that honesty saved time in this town, "the cursed widow." Owen's hands paused for just a moment, then continued their work. "That's so. You do not look cursed to me. You look like a brave woman who just saved a child's life without thinking about her own safety. That is blessed behavior where I come from." Fiona felt something crack open in her chest, something she had kept locked tight for 3 long years. "You do not know what you are talking about. Everyone who gets close to me suffers. My husband died horribly. Good people who show me kindness end up hurt or dead. Even my garden will not grow, and I have tried everything." Owen finished bandaging her shoulder and sat back, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. "Your husband died 3 years ago from a rattlesnake bite while checking fence posts, according to the talk in town. That is tragedy, but not a curse. Mrs. Henderson was 78 years old with poor eyesight and worse balance. And as for your garden, this is desert country, Mrs. Whitmore. Nothing grows easy here without knowing the land's secrets." "How do you know about Jacob's death?" Fiona asked. "About Mrs. Henderson." "Spent some time at the saloon last night. Men talk. I listened." He stood and walked to her window, looking out at her pathetic excuse for a garden. "Your soil is wrong. Too much sand, not enough clay. And you are watering at midday when the sun just burns it all away. You need to water at dawn and dusk, and you need to mix good soil in with what you have got." "I cannot afford good soil," Fiona said quietly. "I can barely afford to eat most months. The pension from Jacob's job at the freight company stopped after a year, and no one in town will hire me. They are too afraid of the curse." Owen turned back to her, and there was something fierce in his expression. "That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard, and I once knew a man who tried to wrestle a bear for a bet." Despite everything, Fiona felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside. It came out rusty and strange, and she realized she had not laughed in longer than she could remember. The sound seemed to please Owen because his stern expression softened into something that might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell under all that beard. "Rest now," he said. "I will check on you later." "You do not have to do that," Fiona protested. "Really, I have taken enough of your time and you have your trading to do." "I will do as I please," Owen said, but there was no harshness in his tone, "and it pleases me to make sure you heal properly." He left before she could argue further, ducking through her doorway and disappearing into the harsh Arizona sunlight. Fiona lay back against her thin pillow and stared at the ceiling, her shoulder throbbing but her mind racing. Owen Xavier. The mountain man who had carried her without fear, who had touched her without flinching, who had looked at her like she was a woman instead of a curse. She told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and she had known enough of that to last several lifetimes. But as she drifted into an uneasy sleep, she found herself thinking about storm cloud eyes and gentle hands, and a voice that had called her blessed. When she woke, the sun had moved across the sky and her small house was stifling hot. Her shoulder ached, but the bleeding had stopped. Fiona sat up carefully and was surprised to find a basket sitting on her table that had not been there before. Inside were fresh bread, cheese, dried meat, and apples that must have cost a small fortune in this desert town. There was no note, but she knew who had left it. She picked up one of the apples, feeling its weight in her palm, its skin smooth and cool. When had anyone last given her something without expecting payment or wanting to prove they were not afraid? She bit into the apple and tasted sweetness and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, despite her best efforts to crush it down. Over the next few days, Owen Xavier became a fixture in Fiona's life with the same inevitability as the sunrise. He came by each morning to check her wound and change her bandages, arriving at dawn before the town was fully awake. He brought food without commenting on her pride or her poverty. He fixed the broken hinge on her front door and replaced 3 roof tiles that had been leaking since last winter's rare rain. "You do not have to do all this," Fiona said on the 4th morning, watching him work on her garden with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. He had brought 3 sacks of good soil from somewhere and was mixing it into her tired earth with his bare hands, his muscles flexing with each movement. "People will talk. People already talk," Owen said without looking up. "About you being cursed, about me being touched in the head for spending time with you. I care about their opinions about as much as I care about the opinion of jackrabbits." "Why are you doing this?" Fiona asked, voicing the question that had kept her awake the past 3 nights. "Why are you being kind to me?" Owen sat back on his heels and looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that made her feel exposed and seen and strangely safe all at once. "You want the truth. I always want the truth. Because when I first saw you in that street, throwing yourself in front of danger to save a child, I saw courage. Pure and simple. Then I heard the whispers, saw how people treated you, and I got angry. I have spent most of my life in the mountains, Mrs. Whitmore, away from the smallness of town thinking. Up there, you are judged by your actions and your character, not by superstition and fear. Your actions speak of a good heart and a brave spirit. That is what I see. That is what I choose to believe." Fiona felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. "You hardly know me. I know enough, and I would like to know more if you will let me." He stood, wiping his hands on his buckskin pants. "I will be in town another week at least, finishing my trading and restocking for the trip back up to my cabin. I would consider it a privilege if you would share a meal with me. A real meal at the hotel restaurant, not the scraps you have been living on." "Owen, I cannot. If you are seen with me publicly like that, the cursed talk will attach to you too. You will lose trading partners. People will refuse to do business with you." "Let them," Owen said with a shrug that suggested he meant it. "I have been trading pelts and game for supplies for 15 years. I know every trading post and settlement between here and Prescott. One small-minded town refusing my business will not hurt me. But letting fear and superstition dictate my choices would hurt my soul, and that I will not abide." He left before she could protest further, but not before promising to return at sunset to escort her to dinner. Fiona stood in her doorway long after he had disappeared down the street, feeling like the solid ground beneath her feet had shifted into something uncertain and thrilling and terrifying. She had not been to the hotel restaurant since Jacob died. She had not been anywhere social or public beyond the necessary trips to buy supplies. The thought of walking in there on Owen's arm made her stomach twist with anxiety. But there was another feeling too, one she barely recognized. Excitement. The desire to put on her one good dress and pin up her hair and feel like a woman again, instead of a ghost haunting the edges of town. That evening, as the brutal heat began to ease and long shadows stretched across Quartzside's dusty streets, Fiona put on her blue cotton dress, the one she had worn to church back when she was still welcome there. She brushed out her long auburn hair and pinned it up in a simple style, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. She had no jewelry left, having sold what little she owned to pay for food during the hardest months, but she pinched her cheeks to bring color to them and bit her lips to make them red. When Owen knocked on her door, she almost lost her courage. But then she opened it and saw his face change, saw something warm and wondering enter those storm cloud eyes, and she found the strength to step forward. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "You cleaned up too," she said, taking in his fresh shirt and the fact that he had trimmed his beard and tied back his hair. He still looked wild and untamed, but there was a careful effort visible that touched her heart. They walked to the hotel in the cooling evening air, and Fiona was acutely aware of every stare, every whispered comment, every door that seemed to close as they passed. But Owen walked with his head high and his stride confident, as if he were escorting a princess instead of a cursed widow, and somehow his certainty became hers. The hotel restaurant fell silent when they entered. The owner, a portly man named Mr. Simmons, actually took a step backward. But Owen simply walked to the best table by the window, pulled out a chair for Fiona with exaggerated courtesy, and sat down across from her as if he owned the place. "We would like your finest steaks," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And whatever vegetables you have that are fresh, and pie for dessert, your choice." Mr. Simmons hesitated only a moment before the promise of money overcame his superstition. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." The meal that followed was the strangest and most wonderful of Fiona's life. At first, the other diners could not stop staring, could not stop whispering. But Owen ignored them completely, focusing his entire attention on Fiona. He asked her about her life before Jacob died, about her childhood in Missouri, about her dreams and hopes, and the person she had been before tragedy and gossip had tried to bury her. "I wanted to be a teacher," she found herself saying, surprised by how easily the words came. "I love books and learning, and I thought it would be wonderful to help children discover that love too. But then my father died and my mother could not manage the farm alone, and I met Jacob at a church social. He was kind and steady, and he offered security. So I married him and came west and put away the teaching dream." "It is not too late," Owen said. "You are young yet. Dreams do not die unless we let them. In this town, no one would send their children to be taught by the cursed widow, and I cannot leave. I have no money, no family, nowhere else to go." Owen was quiet for a moment, cutting into his steak with methodical precision. "What if you did have somewhere to go? What if someone offered you a different life?" Fiona's heart began to beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that my cabin in the Bradshaw Mountains is large enough for two. I am saying that I have been alone up there for a long time, and I had forgotten what it felt like to want company until I met you. I am saying that if you wanted to leave this town and these small-minded people behind, you would have a place with me, a home, safety, and time to figure out who you are without everyone telling you that you are cursed. Owen, you have known me less than a week. I have known men for years, and learned less about their character than I have learned about yours in these few days. I see how you treat that mangy cat that comes by your house, leaving out water even though you barely have enough for yourself. I see how you keep trying with that garden even though you are exhausted and hungry. I see your courage and your kindness and your strength. That is enough for me. You are asking me to come live with you, in your cabin, alone. I am asking you to trust me. I am offering you a chance at a different life. What you make of that chance, what happens between us, that can unfold in its own time. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. But I will not lie to you, Fiona. I am drawn to you in a way I have never been drawn to anyone. I think about you when I should be thinking about other things. I want to know everything about you. I want to make you smile and laugh and forget that you were ever lonely. And if you give me the chance, I would like to court you properly, up in the mountains where no one can whisper curses or make you doubt your own worth. Fiona's hand shook as she lifted her water glass. Everything he was offering sounded too good to be true, like a dream she would wake from to find herself alone in her bed with her shoulder aching and her stomach empty. But the hope she had been trying so hard to suppress came flooding back, undeniable and bright. What if the curse is real? She whispered, what if something terrible happens to you because of me? Then we will face it together, Owen said. But Fiona, there is no curse. There is only bad luck and tragedy and the cruelty of small minds. You are not cursed. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, and it would be my honor to prove to you every single day that you are blessed, not cursed. Tears pricked at Fiona's eyes and she blinked them back fiercely. I need time to think about this. Take all the time you need, Owen said gently. I will not leave town until you give me an answer. They finished their meal in a slightly awkward silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Fiona's mind was racing, examining Owen's offer from every angle, looking for the trap or the trick or the hidden cost, but she could find none. He seemed exactly as he presented himself, a man who had decided she was worth knowing and was willing to back up his words with action. As they left the restaurant, they passed a table where 3 men sat drinking whiskey. One of them, a rancher named Tom Douglas who had sometimes hired Jacob for work, looked up with bleary eyes. Xavier, he slurred, you are making a mistake spending time with that woman. She is cursed, mark my words. Her husband died screaming. Old Mrs. Henderson broke her neck. Even the earth rejects her, will not grow nothing for her. You best move along before her bad luck rubs off on you. Owen stopped walking. Fiona felt his arm tense under her hand, felt the change in him like a storm gathering. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried through the room like thunder. Jacob Whitmore died from a rattlesnake bite, a danger any man faces in this territory. Mrs. Henderson was elderly and lost her balance. And the earth does not reject anyone, but it does require knowledge and care to coax life from it. There is no curse, Mr. Douglas, except the curse of ignorance and the ugliness of people who would rather believe in superstition than show compassion to a widow trying to survive alone. He paused, and his next words were even quieter, even more forceful. But let me make something very clear to everyone in this room. I consider Mrs. Whitmore to be under my protection now. Anyone who speaks ill of her, who treats her with anything less than the respect she deserves, will answer to me. And I promise you, that is not a conversation you want to have. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable despite the measured tone. Tom Douglas paled and looked away. The entire restaurant had gone silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. Fiona felt it like a shift in the wind. Owen guided her out into the night, and she was shaking. though whether from fear or relief or gratitude she could not say. They walked back to her house in silence, the desert stars bright overhead, the air cooling rapidly as it always did once the sun disappeared. At her door, Owen took both her hands in his. "I did not mean to embarrass you in there." "You did not embarrass me," Fiona said, her voice thick with emotion. "No one has ever defended me like that. No one has ever stood up for me. I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about my offer. Say you will consider letting me prove to you that you are blessed." Fiona looked up into his face, this strong, wild man who had crashed into her life like a flash flood in the desert, changing everything. "I will think about it. I promise." He raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her breath catch. Then he released her and stepped back. "I will come by tomorrow morning to check your shoulder," he said, "and to hear your answer if you have one." Fiona lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling of her small adobe house, listening to the distant howl of coyotes and the rustle of wind through the sparse vegetation. Every rational part of her mind told her that going with Owen would be madness. She barely knew him. He was offering her a life of isolation in the mountains, far from any town or civilization. She would be completely dependent on him for survival. But another part of her, the part that had been slowly dying under the weight of Quartzsite's rejection, whispered different counsel. What did she have here? A house that was falling apart, a reputation that would never recover, a life of grinding poverty and loneliness. At least in the mountains with Owen, she would have a chance. A chance to start over, to be seen as something other than cursed, to discover if the feelings growing in her heart had any hope of being returned. By the time the sun rose, painting her walls with pale gold light, Fiona had made her decision. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but it felt right in a way nothing had felt right since Jacob's death. She was packing her meager belongings into an old trunk when Owen arrived. He took one look at her activity, and something fierce and glad blazed across his face. "You are coming with me," he said. It was not a question. "I am coming with you," she confirmed. "Though I must be insane, I hardly know you, Owen Xavier." "Then we will spend every day getting to know each other better," he said, striding across the room to help her pack. "We have a 3-day journey to my cabin. That is plenty of time to talk." 3 days. Fiona's eyes widened. "It is that far. The Bradshaw Mountains are not next door, but I promise the journey will be worth it. My cabin sits in a valley with a year-round stream surrounded by pine trees and mountain meadows. In summer, wildflowers bloom everywhere. In winter, the snow turns everything clean and white and beautiful. It is a good place, Fiona, peaceful, and I think you need peace." They were ready to leave within 2 hours. Fiona's entire life fit into one trunk and 2 bundles. It was both depressing and liberating to see how little she had accumulated, how easily she could walk away from this place that had brought her nothing but pain. She locked the door to her little house for the last time and stood looking at it, feeling like she should mark the moment somehow, should acknowledge the ending of this chapter of her life. But Owen was waiting with his 2 pack horses and his patient strength, and the future suddenly seemed more important than the past. As they rode through Quartzsite's main street, heading north toward the mountains visible in the distance, Fiona saw curtains twitch and faces appear in windows. She saw the surprise and speculation, and on some faces, something that might have been relief. They were glad to see her go, glad to be rid of the cursed widow who had haunted their town's edges like an unwelcome ghost. Let them be glad, she thought, lifting her chin. Let them whisper and wonder. She was done living her life according to their fears and superstitions. Owen led them out of town at a steady pace, his big gelding sure-footed and calm. Fiona's smaller mare, which Owen had acquired somehow that morning, was gentle and easy to manage. They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour, leaving the scattered buildings of Quartzsite behind, heading into the vast Arizona wilderness. The landscape changed gradually as they traveled north. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills, then to steeper terrain scattered with juniper and pinyon pine. The temperature dropped slightly with the elevation, and Fiona found herself breathing easier, feeling like weight was lifting from her shoulders with every mile they put between themselves and her old life. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the food Owen had prepared. Cold biscuits and dried meat and precious water from his canteens. They sat in the shade of a large boulder, and Owen began to talk, telling her about his life in a way he had not done before. "I came west in 1865, after the war ended," he said, staring out at the horizon. "I was 18 and angry and tired of death. I had seen enough killing to last several lifetimes. I wanted silence and space and no people telling me what to do or who to shoot. So I kept moving west until I found the mountains, and I have been there ever since." "You were a soldier?" Fiona asked gently. "For 3 years. I do not talk about it much. Those memories are like rattlesnakes, best left alone unless you want to get bit." He looked at her then, his eyes serious. "But I want you to know who I am, Fiona. I have killed men in battle. I have scars inside and out. I am not easy to live with, probably. I go days without talking sometimes, lost in my own head. I work hard and I expect anyone sharing my home to pull their weight. But I am loyal and I keep my word, and I will never raise a hand to you in anger. That I promise on everything I hold sacred." "Why have you never married?" Fiona asked. "Surely in 15 years you have met women." Owen smiled slightly. "I have met women, but I have been asked that question before by others, and my answer has always been the same. I never met one who made me want to give up my solitude. Until you." "What is different about me?" "Everything," Owen said simply. "The way you saved that boy without hesitation. The way you have kept going despite this town's cruelty. The way you look at the world like you are seeing both its hardness and its beauty at the same time. The way you have not let bitterness poison your heart, even though you would have every right to be bitter. I see you, Fiona Whitmore, and I like everything I see." Fiona felt heat rise in her cheeks. She was not used to such direct praise, such honest appreciation. It made her feel vulnerable and strong simultaneously. "I am afraid," she admitted, "of trusting this, of trusting you. What if I am making a terrible mistake?" "Then we will fix it," Owen said. "Fiona, I need you to understand something. I am not asking you to be my wife tomorrow. I am not even asking you to fall in love with me, though I hope you might in time. I am asking you to give yourself a chance at a different life. You can have your own space in the cabin. You can take time to heal and figure out who you are without Quartzsite's poison in your ears. And if, after some time has passed, you decide you want to leave, I will bring you to Prescott or Phoenix or wherever you want to go, and I will make sure you have money enough to start over. That is my promise to you. You would do that. Let me go if I wanted to leave." "I would do that," Owen confirmed, "though I will do my level best to make you want to stay." They continued their journey in the afternoon, and Owen began pointing out features of the landscape, teaching her about the land they were passing through. He showed her which plants held water in their roots, which could be used for medicine, which were poisonous. He pointed out animal tracks and told her what had made them. He spoke about the weather patterns and how to read the sky for coming storms. Fiona absorbed it all like parched earth soaking up rain. She had always loved learning, and here was an entire world of knowledge she had never been exposed to. Owen was a patient teacher, answering her questions without ever making her feel ignorant, building on each lesson naturally. They made camp that night in a sheltered spot between two large rock formations. Owen set up a tent for Fiona with the same efficient competence he brought to every task, then built a fire and started preparing a proper dinner. Fiona watched him work, noting the way his hands were never idle, the way he seemed completely at home in the wilderness. "Can I help?" she asked. "Can you make coffee?" "Yes." "Then that would be appreciated. I am terrible at coffee. Always make it too strong or too weak, never just right." Fiona smiled and set about the task, using Owen's supplies and his battered coffee pot. She found herself humming as she worked, a habit she had lost years ago, but that seemed to come naturally in this place, away from judgmental eyes and whispered curses. They ate dinner as the stars came out, countless thousands of them scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. Fiona had never seen so many stars. In Quartzsite, there were lights from houses and the hotel, but here there was only the fire and the vast dark wilderness and the celestial display above. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Owen agreed. "This is what I missed most during the war, the stars, the silence, the feeling that the world was bigger than human conflict and stupidity." "Do you ever get lonely up here?" Owen considered the question. "I did not think I did. I thought I preferred solitude. But now, sitting here with you, I realize I have been lonely for a long time. I just did not have anything to compare it to." They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easily now that Fiona's initial fear had begun to ease. Owen told her about the animals that lived in his valley, about the seasons in the mountains, about the challenges of living so far from any town. Fiona told him about her childhood, about her mother who had died 2 years before she met Jacob, about books she had loved and dreams she had shelved. When exhaustion finally claimed them both, Owen banked the fire and showed Fiona to her tent. He had laid out blankets and even a pillow, making it as comfortable as possible. "If you need anything in the night, I will be right outside," he said. "Do not hesitate to call." "Owen," Fiona said as he turned to go, "thank you for all of this, for seeing me when everyone else looked away." His smile was gentle in the firelight. "Sleep well, Fiona. Tomorrow we climb higher into the mountains and the views will take your breath away." The second day of travel was harder, the terrain steeper and rockier, but true to Owen's word, the views were spectacular. They climbed through forests of tall pines that filled the air with their sharp, clean scent. They crossed streams of crystal-clear water running over smooth stones. They saw elk grazing in a meadow, their heads lifting in alert attention before they bounded away into the trees. Fiona's body ached from the riding and the unaccustomed exercise, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. Every mile they traveled seemed to strip away another layer of the heaviness she had been carrying. She began to believe, truly believe, that maybe Owen was right. Maybe there was no curse. Maybe she had just been a woman caught in a series of unfortunate circumstances, made worse by small-minded people looking for someone to blame. That night, they camped beside a stream, and Owen caught trout for their dinner with his bare hands, a skill that astonished Fiona. She watched him wade into the cold water, moving slowly and patiently, then striking with sudden precision. He emerged with 3 fat fish, looking pleased with himself. "Show off," Fiona said, but she was smiling. "I've had a lot of practice," Owen admitted. "Wait until you taste them cooked over an open fire. Best meal you will ever have." He was not wrong. The fish was delicious, seasoned simply with salt and herbs Owen had gathered along the trail. They ate with their fingers, licking the juice from their hands, and Fiona could not remember the last time food had tasted so good or company had felt so easy. "Tell me about your cabin," she said as they cleaned up after dinner. "What is it like?" "It is not fancy," Owen warned. One large room with a sleeping loft, a stone fireplace, a table and chairs I made myself. The windows have real glass, which cost me a year's worth of pelts, but I wanted proper windows to let in the light. There is a root cellar for storage and a small barn for the horses and the 2 goats I keep for milk. I have been building a separate room onto the side for the past year, thinking I might want more space. Now I am glad I did. You have goats. Named Ruth and Esther, Owen said with a slightly embarrassed grin. They are good company and useful. You will like them, I think. They have personalities. The image of this big, fierce mountain man naming his goats after biblical women made Fiona laugh out loud. A real laugh that came from her belly and made her eyes water. Owen watched her with open delight, and when she finally got herself under control, she found him staring at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You should laugh more often," Owen said softly. "It changes your whole face. You go from pretty to beautiful." Fiona ducked her head, flustered. She was not used to compliments, not used to being looked at with such open admiration. Part of her wanted to deflect, to make a joke or change the subject. But another part, a braver part that was slowly waking up, wanted to accept the compliment and the attention and the possibility of something more. "I have not had much to laugh about these past few years," she said finally. "Then I will make it my mission to give you reasons to laugh every day," Owen said. "Starting tomorrow when you meet Ruth and Esther. Ruth is particularly ornery and will try to steal any food you are carrying. Consider yourself warned." The 3rd day of travel brought them deep into the Bradshaw Mountains, climbing to an elevation where the air was noticeably cooler, and the vegetation changed to thick pine forests and open meadows. Owen pointed out his markers, subtle signs he had left to guide himself home. A stack of 3 stones here, a blaze cut into a tree trunk there. The path was invisible to anyone who did not know to look for it, a security measure Owen had implemented years ago to keep his home private. "You ever have visitors?" Fiona asked. "Once or twice a year, I will have a trapper friend pass through. And I make my trips down to Quartzsite or Prescott 3 or 4 times a year to trade and resupply. But mostly, it is just me and the mountains. It can be isolating, Fiona. I want you to understand that before we arrive. The nearest neighbor is 2 days' ride away. If you need help or company or something I cannot provide, it is not a quick trip to get it." "After Quartzsite, isolation sounds like paradise," Fiona said honestly. "I am more worried about being useful, about pulling my weight, as you said." "I do not know anything about mountain living." "You will learn," Owen said confidently. "You saved a child without thinking about the danger. You kept yourself alive in a town that shunned you. You have courage and determination. Those are the most important skills. Everything else I can teach you." They arrived at Owen's cabin in the late afternoon, and Fiona felt her breath catch at the beauty of it. The cabin sat in a small valley surrounded by towering pines, with a stream running through the meadow nearby. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat at lower elevations. Wildflowers dotted the meadow in splashes of purple and yellow and red. Birds sang in the trees. The air smelled of pine and clean water and earth. The cabin itself was larger than Fiona had expected, built of solid logs chinked with clay. A stone chimney rose from one end. The windows Owen had mentioned gleamed in the afternoon light. A porch ran across the front, and 2 goats watched their approach from a small enclosure near a sturdy barn. "Owen," Fiona said softly, "it is beautiful, like something from a story." She saw pride flash across his face, quickly masked. "I built it with my own hands. Took 2 years of hard work, but I wanted it done right, Come, let me show you inside. He dismounted and helped Fiona down, his hands strong and sure on her waist. She was stiff from 3 days of riding, and she stumbled slightly as her feet hit the ground. Owen caught her easily, steadying her, and for a moment they stood very close, his hands still on her waist, her palms resting against his chest. The moment stretched between them, electric and uncertain. Fiona could feel the warmth of him through his shirt, could smell leather and pine and something uniquely him. His eyes had darkened, and she saw him swallow hard, saw the effort it took for him to step back and release her. "Steady now?" he asked, his voice slightly rough. "Yes," Fiona managed. "Thank you." The interior of the cabin was as impressive as the exterior. The main room was spacious and well organized, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Handmade furniture, simple but well crafted, filled the space. A ladder led to a sleeping loft above. Shelves lined the walls, holding books and supplies and various tools. The floor was made of smooth planks that showed signs of careful maintenance. But what really caught Fiona's attention was how clean everything was. She had expected a bachelor's mess, but Owen's home was neat and orderly, everything in its place. The windows let in golden afternoon light, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the table. "Did you put those flowers there?" she asked. Owen looked slightly embarrassed. "I thought you might like them. Picked them this morning before we left on the final stretch." Fiona felt something in her chest squeeze tight. This rough, strong man had thought to pick flowers for her, had wanted to make his home welcoming. She walked to the table and touched one of the delicate purple blooms, feeling emotion well up in her throat. "The new room is through there," Owen said, gesturing to a door in the side wall. "It is not completely finished yet. I still need to build furniture and add some finishing touches. But the walls and roof are solid, and it will be yours. Your own private space." Fiona opened the door and found a room about half the size of the main cabin, with a window looking out onto the meadow. The walls were bare logs, the floor unfinished but level. It smelled of fresh cut wood and possibility. "I can make you a bed frame this week," Owen said from behind her, "and a chest for your clothes, maybe a chair if you want one. You can tell me what you need and I will build it. You would do that for me." "Fiona, I will do anything for you," Owen said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her turn to face him. "I brought you here because I want you to stay. I want to court you properly, to give you time to see who I really am and decide if you could be happy here. With me. But even if you decide in the end that you cannot, I want you to be comfortable while you are here. I want you to have your own space and your own things, and the knowledge that you are not beholden to me for anything." "I do not know what to say," Fiona whispered. "Say you will give this place a chance. Give me a chance." "I will," Fiona said. "I already have by coming here. Owen, I am scared, but I am also hopeful in a way I have not been in so long. Thank you for giving me that hope." Owen smiled, and it transformed his stern face into something warm and boyish. "Come on. Let me introduce you to Ruth and Esther before I get the horses settled. Those goats have been glaring at us through the window since we arrived, and they do not like to be kept waiting." The goats turned out to be as entertaining as Owen had promised. Ruth, the larger of the two, immediately tried to eat Fiona's skirt hem while Esther head butted Owen's leg in greeting. Fiona found herself laughing as she tried to keep her clothing away from Ruth's determined chewing. "See." "Ornery," Owen said, gently pushing Ruth away. "But she gives good milk and keeps the grass around the cabin trimmed, mostly because she will eat anything that does not move fast enough." That first evening in the cabin passed in a flurry of activity, as Owen unloaded the pack horses and showed Fiona where everything was stored. He gave her free rein in the kitchen, such as it was, and seemed genuinely pleased when she took over the cooking of dinner. Fiona found his supplies well stocked and organized, and she put together a simple stew from dried vegetables and salt pork, letting it simmer over the fire while Owen tended to the animals. They ate at the handmade table as twilight deepened outside the windows, and Fiona felt something settle in her chest, something that felt dangerously like contentment. The food was good. The cabin was warm despite the cooling evening air, and Owen's company was easy and comfortable. He told her about the daily rhythms of his life here, about the work that needed doing, about the challenges and rewards of mountain living. "Winter is the hardest," he admitted. "The snow can get deep, and there are stretches where you cannot leave the cabin for days at a time. You have to plan ahead, make sure you have enough firewood and food stored, but there is a beauty to it too, a peace. The world gets very quiet under snow." "It sounds lonely," Fiona said. "It can be, but this year if you stay it will not be lonely at all." After dinner, Fiona helped clean up, and then Owen disappeared into her new room with his tools. She heard sawing and hammering, and when she peeked in an hour later, she found him putting together a simple bed frame with surprising speed and skill. "You do not have to do this tonight," she protested. "I can sleep on the floor or on blankets." "You will sleep in a proper bed," Owen said firmly. "It is not fancy, but it will hold a mattress. I have an extra one in the loft that I will bring down. And tomorrow we can stuff a pillow for you with pine needles. They smell good and make for comfortable sleeping." By full dark, Fiona had a furnished room, basic but functional and hers. Owen had carried down the mattress, found extra blankets and a quilt his mother had made years ago. He had even hung pegs on the wall for her clothes. Standing in the doorway, looking at the space he had created for her in a matter of hours, Fiona felt overwhelmed by gratitude and something deeper, something she was not quite ready to name. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "Be happy here," Owen said simply. "That is all the thanks I need." That night, Fiona lay in her new bed in her new room in this cabin in the mountains, listening to unfamiliar sounds, the rustle of wind in the pines, the distant call of an owl, the creak of the cabin settling. And softer, from the main room, the sound of Owen moving around, preparing for his own sleep in the loft. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the tragedy and loneliness that had defined her life for 3 years, about the unexpected salvation that had arrived in the form of a mountain man who saw her as blessed instead of cursed. She thought about Owen's strength and gentleness, about the way he looked at her and made her feel seen and valued. She thought about the possibility of a future here, in this beautiful wild place, with a man who made her feel safe and cherished. It was too soon to call it love. She hardly knew him, despite the intensity of the past few days. But it was something, the seed of something that could grow into love, given time and care and the courage to trust again. Fiona fell asleep with a smile on her face, the first genuine smile she had worn to bed in longer than she could remember. The days that followed established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Owen woke with the sun and tended to the animals before starting his daily work. Fiona rose shortly after and made breakfast, learning to cook on the fireplace and enjoying the challenge. After breakfast, Owen would work on whatever project needed attention, and Fiona would accompany him, learning as she went. He taught her how to milk the goats, a process that left her frustrated and laughing as Ruth tried repeatedly to kick over the bucket. He showed her which plants in the meadow were edible and which were medicinal. He took her fishing in the stream and patiently taught her how to read the water for the best spots. He introduced her to his garden, tucked into a sunny spot near the cabin, and explained how the cooler mountain climate allowed for different crops than the desert below. "This is why your garden in Quartzsite struggled," he said, showing her his thriving vegetables. "Down there you need desert plants, things adapted to heat and little water. You were trying to grow things meant for a different climate. It was not you. It was not a curse. It was just not knowing the land." Fiona absorbed every lesson, her mind hungry for knowledge after years of stagnation. She made mistakes, but Owen was patient, correcting her gently and praising her successes enthusiastically. Under his guidance and encouragement, she began to feel competent again, useful, valued. The evenings were her favorite time. After dinner, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. They talked about everything and nothing. Owen told her stories about his years in the mountains, about close calls with bears and harsh winters, and the occasional traveler who passed through. Fiona told him about books she had read, about her childhood and her parents, about dreams she had set aside but was starting to believe might be possible again. "I could teach children here," she said one evening, the thought occurring to her suddenly. "Not many, obviously. But the trappers and settlers you mentioned, some of them must have families, children who need education. I could offer lessons if anyone wanted them." "That is a fine idea," Owen said, his eyes lighting up. "There is a family about 2 days northeast of here with 4 children. And the Morrison family, about 3 days south, has 6. They would probably jump at the chance for regular schooling. We could make it work if you wanted to try." The fact that he said "we" and meant it, that he automatically included himself in her dreams, made Fiona's heart swell with affection. Owen was not trying to change her or make her into something she was not. He was helping her become more fully herself, the self she had been before tragedy and Quartzsite had tried to crush it out of her. 2 weeks into her stay at the cabin, Fiona woke to the sound of rain on the roof, a rare event in this dry climate. She dressed and emerged from her room to find Owen had already made coffee and was standing at the window, watching the rain fall. "This is good," he said when he heard her. "The forest needs it, and it will fill the stream higher. We should have a lazy day inside, maybe do some mending and organizing." It was the first full day they had spent entirely in the cabin together, and Fiona found it surprisingly intimate. Owen worked on repairing leather goods and sharpening tools while Fiona mended shirts and sewed a new skirt from fabric Owen had stored away. They worked in companionable silence, occasionally commenting on something or sharing a story, but mostly just existing together in the same space. At one point, Fiona looked up from her sewing to find Owen watching her, his expression unguarded and warm. When their eyes met, he did not look away. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "That I was right," he said. "About you being blessed. Having you here has changed everything, Fiona. This cabin feels like a home now instead of just a place I sleep. I find myself looking forward to meals because we will eat together. I plan my work with the thought of what I can teach you that day. I wake up happy, knowing you are here. That is a gift I did not expect and do not take for granted." Fiona set down her sewing, her hands trembling slightly. "Owen, I need to tell you something. I need you to understand where I am in all this." "All right," he said, giving her his full attention. "When I agreed to come here, I was so desperate to escape Quartzsite that I probably would have gone anywhere with anyone who offered me kindness. I want you to know that. I want you to know that in the beginning, this was about survival as much as anything else." Owen nodded slowly, his expression guarded now. "But these past 2 weeks," Fiona continued, "have shown me something I did not expect. You are not just kind, Owen. You are good. You are patient and skilled and funny in your quiet way. You make me feel safe and valued and seen." You encourage my dreams insteed of trying to make me smaller. And I find myself thinking about you at odd moments, wondering what you are doing, looking forward to seeing you at the end of the day. I do not know if this is love yet. It is too soon for me to say that with certainty. But it is something real and growing, and I wanted you to know." The guarded expression melted from Owen's face, replaced by something so tender and hopeful that it made Fiona's breath catch. He set aside his work and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "Can I touch you?" he asked quietly. Fiona nodded, not trusting her voice. Owen reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough from work but so gentle. "I fell for you the moment I saw you throw yourself in front of danger to save that boy," he said. "And I have been falling deeper every day since. I want you to know that I will wait as long as you need. There is no rush, no pressure. We have time, Fiona, all the time in the world." Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle and tentative and full of question. Fiona froze for just a moment, startled by the contact, by the feeling of his mouth on hers. Then she leaned into it, her hands coming up to rest on his broad shoulders, and the kiss deepened. It was nothing like kissing Jacob, which had always been pleasant but perfunctory, an obligation of marriage. Kissing Owen felt like coming alive, like discovering a part of herself she had not known existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fiona saw her own wonder reflected in Owen's eyes. "That was," she started, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "Yes," Owen agreed, a smile tugging at his lips. "It certainly was." They spent the rest of the rainy day in a new awareness of each other. The tension between them changed from uncertain to charged with possibility. Owen found excuses to touch her, a hand on her back as he moved past her in the small space, fingers brushing hers when he handed her something. Fiona discovered she liked touching him too, liked the solid strength of him, the way he seemed to lean into her touch like a plant seeking sun. That night, as they said goodnight at the door to her room, Owen kissed her again, longer and deeper, until Fiona's knees went weak and she had to clutch his shirt to stay upright. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire but also full of restraint. "Sleep well," he said, his voice rough. "You too," Fiona whispered, then slipped into her room before she could do something foolish like ask him to stay. As summer deepened into its fullest heat, even in the mountains, Fiona and Owen's relationship deepened as well. They kissed often now, stolen moments throughout the day that left them both flushed and breathless. But Owen held to his word, never pushing for more, never pressuring her beyond what she was ready to give. His restraint and respect only made Fiona want him more. She began to notice things about him that made her heart tender. The way he sang quietly to the goats as he milked them. The care he took in maintaining everything around the cabin, wanting his home to be welcoming and comfortable. The gentleness with which he handled injured animals he found in the forest, once nursing a rabbit with a broken leg back to health before releasing it. One evening, about a month after Fiona's arrival, Owen returned from checking his trap lines with a troubled expression. He set down his pack and came to stand before Fiona where she was weeding the garden. "I need to make a trip to Prescott," he said. "It is time to trade the pelts I have been accumulating, and I need to restock some supplies we are running low on. The trip will take about a week, there and back." Fiona's heart sank at the thought of being without him for that long. In just a month, she had grown so accustomed to his presence that the cabin would feel empty without him, but she forced herself to nod calmly. "Of course. You have your work to do. I will be fine here." "I know you will be fine," Owen said, crouching beside her. "You have learned so much, and you are more than capable of managing things for a week. But Fiona, I do not want to leave you. The thought of being away from you for 7 days makes me miserable." "Then come back quickly," Fiona said, trying to smile. "I will ride hard," Owen promised. "And Fiona, while I am gone, I want you to think about something. Think about whether you want to make this permanent. Whether you can see yourself building a life here with me, not just as a temporary refuge but as your real home. Because I need you to know that I love you. I love you completely and without reservation. And if you feel even a fraction of that for me, I want to marry you. I want you to be my wife, to share my life and my home and my future, but only if that is what you want too." Fiona's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the kind that came from being overwhelmed by emotion too big for her body to contain. "Owen," she whispered. "Do not answer now," he said quickly, misreading her tears. "Take the week while I am gone. Think about it. When I come back, you can tell me what you have decided. And Fiona, if your answer is no, if you decide you want something different, I will accept it. I will take you wherever you want to go and make sure you have the means to start over. I promised you that in the beginning, and I stand by it." He left the next morning, and Fiona stood on the porch watching until he disappeared into the trees, her heart feeling like it had been tied to his saddle and was being dragged away with him. Then she turned and looked at the cabin, at the life they had built together over the past month, and she began to think seriously about Owen's proposal. Did she love him? She examined her heart with brutal honesty. She cared for him deeply. She enjoyed his company and his kisses, and the way he made her feel safe and valued. She respected his skills and his character. She loved the life they were building together, the rhythm of their days, the peace of this mountain valley. But was it love? The kind of love that justified marriage and a lifetime commitment? Fiona spent the week working hard, keeping herself busy so she would not obsess over the question. She tended the garden and the goats. She practiced her fishing until she could reliably catch enough for dinner. She explored the meadow and the edge of the forest, gaining confidence in her ability to navigate this wild place. And in the quiet moments, especially in the evenings when Owen's absence was most acutely felt, she thought about her future. She thought about the alternative. She could ask Owen to take her to Prescott or Phoenix, to use his money to set herself up in a new place. She could try to find work, perhaps as a teacher or a housekeeper. She could build a different life, independent and free from any man, but the thought made her feel hollow. She did not want a life without Owen in it. She did not want to wake up in a strange city, alone, starting over from nothing again. She wanted this cabin and these mountains and the man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. She wanted to build a future with him, to share his days and his dreams and maybe, someday, to have children who would grow up in this beautiful wild place. She wanted Owen, not just because he represented safety or security, but because he was him. Because he made her laugh and challenged her to grow and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Because when she imagined her future, he was in every scene. Maybe that was love. Maybe love was not just a feeling but a choice, a decision to commit yourself to another person's well-being and happiness. Maybe it was the daily acts of care and consideration and partnership. Maybe it was looking at someone and thinking, "Yes, you, I choose you," over and over again. By the time Owen returned 6 days later, riding up to the cabin just as the sun was setting, Fiona had her answer. She met him on the porch, and the relief and joy on his face when he saw her made her heart skip. "You are back," she said unnecessarily. "I rode straight through, barely stopping," Owen admitted, dismounting and tying his horse quickly. "I could not stand another night away from you. Fiona, please tell me you have not spent the week deciding to leave." "I have spent the week deciding to stay," Fiona said, her voice steady and sure. "I love you, Owen Xavier. I do not know when it happened exactly, Maybe it was a gradual thing, or maybe it was all at once and I was just too scared to acknowledge it. But I love you, and I want to marry you, and I want to build a life here with you." Owen's face transformed, joy blazing across it like sunrise. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and clutched at his shoulders. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, deeply, until Fiona's toes curled and her mind went blissfully blank. "When?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "When can we get married?" "As soon as you want," Fiona said. "Though I suppose we need to go to a town with a preacher, and we need to make it legal and proper." "Tomorrow," Owen said immediately. "We will ride to Prescott tomorrow. I just came from there, but I do not care. I will turn right back around and take you there. We can be married by the end of the week, and you will be Mrs. Fiona Xavier, and I will be the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory." They were married 5 days later in Prescott, in a small church with the preacher's wife and the shopkeeper's family as witnesses. Fiona wore a new dress that Owen had insisted on buying, a simple blue cotton that made her eyes bright. Owen wore clean clothes and had trimmed his beard, looking almost civilized except for the wildness that never quite left his eyes. The ceremony was short and simple, but the words meant everything. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Owen kissed her in front of God and the witnesses, Fiona felt like a weight she had been carrying for years finally lifted. She was no longer the cursed widow. She was Fiona Xavier, wife of a good man, starting a new life full of possibility. They spent their wedding night in a hotel room in Prescott, and Owen was gentle and patient, making their first time together as husband and wife tender and sweet. He worshipped her body with his hands and his mouth, taking his time, making sure she felt pleasure before seeking his own. Afterward, Fiona lay in his arms, feeling cherished and safe and incredibly lucky. "I never thought I would have this again," she whispered into the darkness. "A husband, a home, a future. I thought I was destined to live out my days alone and cursed." "You were never cursed," Owen said, his hand stroking her hair. "You were just waiting for the right person to see you clearly. I am glad I was that person, Fiona. I am glad fate or God or whatever you want to call it brought me to Quartzsite on the exact day you needed someone to see you." "I am glad too," Fiona said. "I love you, Owen." "I love you too," he replied. "More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." They returned to the mountain cabin as husband and wife, and if Fiona had thought the place felt like home before, it was nothing compared to how it felt now. This was her home, truly and completely. Owen was her husband, truly and completely. They were building a life together, and it was real and solid and hers in a way nothing had been since Jacob's death. The months that followed were the happiest of Fiona's life. She and Owen settled into married life with surprising ease, learning each other's habits and preferences, negotiating the small adjustments that came with sharing a space completely. Fiona moved her things into the loft with Owen, and her former room became a storage area, and they hoped, eventually a nursery. True to their earlier conversation, word spread among the scattered mountain families about Fiona's willingness to teach, and by autumn, she had 4 students who came twice a week for lessons. The Morrison children and 2 others made the journey to the cabin, and Fiona discovered that teaching filled a part of her soul she had not realized was empty. She loved seeing the children learn, loved watching their faces light up when they mastered a new skill or understood a difficult concept. Owen built her a proper schoolroom in the barn, with benches and a slate board and shelves for the books he kept buying on every trip to town. He supported her teaching completely, rearranging his schedule to be available when the children came in case they needed anything. Winter came to the mountains with a vengeance, just as Owen had warned. The snow piled deep, and there were weeks when they could not leave the cabin. But Fiona found she did not mind. She had Owen and books and work to keep her hands busy. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading aloud to each other, and making love in their warm loft while the wind howled outside. It was during one of those snowed-in weeks that Fiona realized her monthly courses had not come. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Owen's hopes up before she was certain. But when another month passed with no sign of her courses, and she began to feel queasy in the mornings, she knew. She told Owen one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. "I am pregnant," she said simply, watching his face for his reaction. Owen went very still, his eyes searching hers. "You are certain as I can be without seeing a doctor, but all the signs are there." Owen let out a whoop of joy that startled her, then pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Fiona asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Owen said. "Fiona, you have given me so much already. A home that feels like a home, purpose beyond just survival, love I never expected to find, and now a child. I do not have words for what I am feeling right now." Fiona felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I am scared," she admitted. "Childbirth is dangerous, especially out here so far from doctors. What if something goes wrong?" "Then we will handle it together," Owen said firmly, "and nothing is going to go wrong. You are strong and healthy. We have months to prepare. I will make sure you have everything you need, that we have supplies and knowledge, and when the time comes, I will be right there with you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Fiona's body changed, her belly swelling with the growing life inside her. Owen was attentive and protective, making sure she did not overwork herself, taking on extra chores without being asked. He read every book about childbirth and pregnancy he could get his hands on, appearing one day with an entire stack he had purchased in Prescott. As summer returned to the mountains, bringing warmth and wildflowers and the return of her students, Fiona felt like her life had come full circle. A year ago, she had been the cursed widow of Quartzsite, alone and hopeless. Now she was Fiona Xavier, mountain wife and teacher and soon-to-be mother, loved and valued and blessed beyond measure. Her labor began on a warm August evening, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. Owen had been preparing for this moment for months, and he moved with calm efficiency, helping her through the contractions, offering water and comfort and encouragement. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Fiona thought she could not do it, when the pain was too much and her strength was failing. But Owen never left her side, never stopped believing in her, never stopped telling her that she was strong and brave and that they would meet their child soon. Their son was born in the afternoon, arriving with a lusty cry that filled the cabin with sound and life. Owen cut the cord with shaking hands and placed the baby on Fiona's chest, and they both stared at this tiny, perfect person they had created together, awed and terrified and overwhelmingly in love. "He is beautiful," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are beautiful. You are both so beautiful." They named him Oliver, and he became the center of their world. Fiona recovered quickly from the birth, her body strong from a year of mountain living. Owen proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, helping with night feedings and diaper changes without complaint. The cabin that had once been a bachelor's solitary retreat became filled with the sounds of family. Oliver's cries and gurgles, Fiona singing lullabies, Owen's deep voice telling stories. the laughter and conversation between husband and wife, the students who came for lessons and cooed over the baby. It was loud and messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Olive, and 2 years after that, another son they named Oscar. The cabin expanded, with Owen adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. The school continued, with Fiona teaching when she could and taking breaks when the babies were young. Owen's trapping and trading business thrived, providing more than enough for their needs. On a warm summer evening, 5 years after Fiona had first arrived at the cabin, she stood on the porch watching Owen play with their 3 children in the meadow. Oliver, at 4, was trying to teach his younger siblings how to catch grasshoppers. Olive, at 2, was more interested in picking wildflowers. Baby Oscar was content to sit in the grass and watch everything with wide eyes. Fiona's hand rested on her belly, where a 4th child was just beginning to make its presence known. She had not told Owen yet, wanting to wait a little longer to be certain. But she knew. Her body knew. She thought about the woman she had been in Quartzsite, broken and afraid and convinced she was cursed. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another life. That woman could never have imagined standing here, watching her husband play with their children in a mountain meadow, pregnant with another baby, teaching students twice a week, genuinely and completely happy. Owen looked up and caught her watching. His face broke into that smile she loved, the one that transformed him from stern mountain man to the gentle, loving husband and father he had become. He said something to the children, then jogged over to the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I am thinking about how blessed I am," Fiona said, leaning back into his solid warmth. "How blessed we are. Look at what we have built, Owen. A family, a home, a life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "You were always blessed," Owen said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I just helped you see it. You did all the hard work of believing it yourself." "We did it together," Fiona corrected. "Everything we have, we built together." Owen turned her in his arms so she was facing him. "I have something to tell you," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "What?" "I ran into Tom Douglas in Prescott last month. Remember him? The drunk who warned me about your curse that night at the restaurant." Fiona felt her stomach tighten. She had not thought about Quartzsite or anyone from that time in years. "What about him?" "He asked about you. Asked if you were still alive or if the curse had gotten me yet. So I told him about our life, about our children and your teaching and how happy we are. Do you know what he said?" "What?" "He said maybe there was never a curse. Maybe the town had just been cruel to a widow who deserved better. He said he was ashamed of how he treated you, how they all treated you. He asked me to tell you that if I ever got the chance." Fiona felt tears prick at her eyes. "He said that, he did." "I think seeing our family, seeing how wrong they were about you, it changed his thinking. It will not change the past, but maybe it means other widows or outcasts will be treated better in the future." "I forgive him," Fiona said, surprised to find she meant it. "I forgive all of them. How can I hold on to anger when I have all this? When their cruelty led me to you." Owen kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that still made her heart flutter even after 5 years of marriage. When he pulled back, his hand moved to her belly and his eyebrows rose in question. "Are you?" he asked. "How did you know?" "I know you," Owen said simply. "I know your body and your rhythms. I have been suspecting for a few weeks now. I was just waiting for you to tell me." "We are going to have another baby," Fiona confirmed. "Are you happy?" "I am always happy when it comes to you and our family," Owen said. "Every child is a blessing, Fiona. Every single one." They stood on the porch together, watching their children play in the golden evening light, and Fiona felt profound gratitude for the unexpected path her life had taken. She had been the widow they called cursed, broken and alone and convinced she brought misfortune to everyone around her. But Owen had seen through the superstition and fear to the woman underneath. He had called her blessed, and had proven it every single day since, with his love and his loyalty and his unwavering faith in her. She was blessed, not because of some magical change in circumstance, but because she had found the courage to trust again, to hope again, to love again. She was blessed because she had chosen to see herself through Owen's eyes, instead of through the eyes of those who had rejected her. She was blessed because she had built this life, this family, this home, through hard work and determination, and the steady support of a man who loved her without reservation. The mountains rose around them, eternal and solid, a fitting backdrop for a love that felt just as enduring. Fiona Xavier, former cursed widow, now beloved wife and mother, stood in the embrace of her husband and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The sun set behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold, and Oliver called out for his parents to come join them in the meadow. Owen took Fiona's hand, and together they walked out to their children, their family, their blessed and beautiful life. Years continued to pass in the mountain valley, each season bringing its own rhythms and challenges and joys. The fourth baby, another daughter they named Ophelia, arrived that winter during a snowstorm that left them snowed in for 2 weeks. Owen delivered the baby himself with steady hands and a calm demeanor, and Fiona marveled at how far they had both come from those first uncertain days. The children grew strong and capable, learning the skills of mountain living from their father and the love of learning from their mother. Oliver became skilled at tracking and trapping, often accompanying Owen on his trips through the forest. Olive showed a gift for working with animals, taking over the care of the goats and the chickens they had added to their small farm. Oscar was quieter, more contemplative, happiest with a book in his hands, and little Ophelia was fearless, climbing trees and exploring the meadow with a boldness that both terrified and delighted her parents. Fiona's school continued to grow. Word of her teaching had spread throughout the scattered mountain communities, and eventually she had a dozen students coming twice a week. Owen built a larger schoolhouse separate from the barn, with proper desks and a wood stove for winter classes. Some of the older students helped with the younger ones, creating a community of learning that gave Fiona deep satisfaction. The Xavier family became well known throughout the region, not as the cursed widow and the reclusive mountain man, but as a strong, loving family who helped their neighbors and contributed to the scattered community. Owen's trading business expanded to include guiding services for newcomers to the area. Fiona's teaching became essential for the mountain families who had no other access to education. They faced hardships, of course. There was the winter when Oscar fell through ice on the stream, and Owen had to dive in after him, both of them nearly dying from the cold before Fiona got them warmed up. There was the summer when wildfires threatened their valley, and they spent terrifying days fighting the flames and evacuating their animals. There was the year the crops failed and money grew tight, and they had to make do with far less than they were accustomed to. But they faced every challenge together, and their love only grew stronger through adversity. Owen never stopped looking at Fiona like she was the most precious thing in his world. Fiona never stopped marveling at the life this man had given her, the future he had made possible through his simple act of seeing her truly. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen took Fiona on a trip back to Quartzsite. She had not been back since the day she left with him, and she was not certain she wanted to return. But Owen insisted, saying there was something he wanted her to see. The town had changed in a decade. New buildings lined the main street. The population had grown. But the hotel where they had eaten dinner that fateful night was still there, and the mercantile and the church where Fiona had once been welcome. They rode through town slowly, and Fiona was aware of people staring, pointing, whispering. But this time, the whispers were not about curses. They were about the woman who had left as a broken widow and returned as a confident wife and mother, prosperous and clearly happy. Owen led her to the small cemetery on the edge of town and stopped in front of a well-maintained grave, Jacob Whitmore's grave. Fiona had not visited it since the funeral, too caught up in her own survival to tend to it properly, and guilt had haunted her for years. But someone had been tending it. Fresh flowers sat in a vase by the headstone. The grass was trimmed. The stone was clean. "Who?" Fiona asked, confused. "I came down here every few months," Owen said quietly, "to make sure his grave was cared for. He was your husband, Fiona. He deserves respect and remembrance even though you moved on and built a new life. I wanted you to know that he has not been forgotten." Fiona stared at her husband, this incredible man who had cared for her first husband's grave without ever telling her, who had honored her past even while building her future. She felt love so overwhelming it took her breath away. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything good in this world," Owen said firmly, "and I am lucky enough to be part of it." They stood together at Jacob's grave, and Fiona said a silent goodbye to the young woman she had been when she was his wife. That woman had been happy in her simple way, but she had not known real love, real partnership, real joy. She had not known what it meant to be truly seen and valued. She sent up a prayer of thanks for Jacob's kindness and a prayer of gratitude for the path that had led her to Owen. Before leaving town, they stopped at the hotel restaurant, the very place where Owen had first publicly defended her. Mr. Simmons, older now and grayer, greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Xavier," he said, using her married name with respect. "It is good to see you and looking so well, if I may say so." "Thank you, Mr. Simmons," Fiona said. "It is good to be back, though I must admit I was nervous." "You should not be," he said seriously. "This town owes you an apology, Mrs. Xavier. We treated you shamefully in your time of grief. Some of us have learned from that mistake, not all but some." They ate their meal in the same window seat where they had sat a decade before, and Fiona realized that the memory no longer had the power to hurt her. She could look at the other diners, see a few familiar faces, and feel only a distant pity for the fear and superstition that had ruled this place. "Are you glad we came?" Owen asked as they prepared to leave. "I am," Fiona said. "I needed to see that I have truly moved on, that the past no longer has a hold on me. And Owen, thank you, for caring for Jacob's grave, for bringing me here, for everything you have done to help me heal." They rode out of Quartzsite that afternoon, heading back to their mountain home, and Fiona did not look back. She had made her peace with her past. Her future lay ahead, in a valley surrounded by mountains, with a man who loved her and children who needed her, and a life that brought her joy every single day. More years passed. The children grew into young adults, each finding their own path. Oliver married a girl from one of the neighboring mountain families and built his own cabin 2 miles from his parents' place, continuing his father's trapping tradition. Olive became a midwife and healer, using the knowledge she had gained from her mother and from her own studies to help the mountain community. Oscar moved to Prescott to become a teacher in the growing town, writing letters home every week that Fiona treasured. Ophelia was still young, but she showed signs of becoming a guide like her father, with an uncanny ability to read the land and the weather. Fiona and Owen grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard mountain living, but their love never diminishing. They spent their days working side by side, their evenings on the porch watching the sunset, their nights wrapped in each other's arms. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep affection and unwavering commitment. On a cool autumn evening, as they sat on their porch with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, Fiona looked at her husband and felt the same flutter of feeling she had experienced when he first carried her to her house in Quartzsite all those years ago. "What?" Owen asked, catching her looking. "I was just thinking about that first day," Fiona said. "When you carried me home after I saved Peter Henderson. Do you remember?" "I remember everything about that day," Owen said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. And the most beautiful, even covered in dust and bleeding." "I thought you were touched in the head," Fiona admitted with a laugh. "This wild mountain man who was not afraid of the cursed widow. I could not understand it." "There was nothing to be afraid of," Owen said. "Only a woman who deserved better than she was getting. I am glad I was there that day, Fiona. Glad I had the sense to see you for who you really were." "You saved my life," Fiona said seriously. "Not just that day, but every day since. You gave me a reason to live again, a reason to hope. You proved to me that I was not cursed, that I could have good things, that I was worthy of love. You did that, Owen. You and no one else." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions but not really living. You made this cabin a home. You filled my days with purpose and my nights with warmth. You gave me a family and a future. We saved each other, Fiona. That is the truth of it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set and the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The stream babbled over its rocks. The wind whispered through the pine trees, all the sounds of the mountains that had become as familiar as breathing. Fiona thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and loss that had seemed insurmountable at the time but had ultimately led her to this moment, this man, this life. She thought about the people of Quartzsite who had called her cursed, who had seen her as bad luck incarnate, who had made her believe she was unworthy of happiness. How wrong they had been. How utterly and completely wrong. She was not cursed. She had never been cursed. She was blessed. Blessed with resilience and courage. Blessed with the ability to survive and adapt. Blessed with a man who saw her clearly and loved her completely. Blessed with children and grandchildren and a life full of meaning and purpose. Owen had told her from the beginning that she was blessed, not cursed. He had believed it when no one else did, when she did not believe it herself. And he had proven it every single day since, with his actions and his words and his unwavering devotion. She was the widow they had called cursed. But the mountain man had called her blessed, and he had been right all along. "I love you," Fiona said, reaching over to take Owen's hand. "I love you too," he replied, squeezing her fingers gently. "Today and every day." They sat together on their porch as full darkness fell, and the mountain stars blazed overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy and loss. Their story was one of redemption and healing, of courage and faith, of love that proved stronger than superstition and fear. In the cabin behind them, a lamp glowed warm and golden in the window. The goats settled in their pen for the night. The horses shifted in their barn. All the small sounds of home and family and life well lived. Fiona Xavier, former widow of Quartzsite, now matriarch of a thriving mountain family, looked at the life she had built and knew profound gratitude. She had been given a second chance by a man who saw her worth when others saw only curse. She had taken that chance and made something extraordinary from it. She was blessed. She had always been blessed, and every day of her life with Owen Xavier proved it beyond any doubt. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and the mountains stood eternal and strong, and in their valley, two people who loved each other sat together in perfect contentment, their hands clasped, their hearts full, their story complete and beautiful and true. This was happiness. This was love. This was home. And Fiona knew she would never take a single moment of it for granted.